Holding on to someone who doesn't value you is one of the most destructive forms of self-betrayal. It's insisting on staying where your presence doesn't matter. It's giving love where you only receive indifference. It's begging for emotional crumbs while the other person feeds off your energy without giving anything in return. And the worst part is, deep down, you know you don't deserve this, yet you stay. Carl Jung once said, "What you resist persists." And that is exactly what happens when you refuse to let go of someone who doesn't value you. You resist accepting reality. You resist understanding that love should never be begged for. You resist realizing that the more you cling, the less you're appreciated. The result is a vicious cycle where you drain yourself mentally, emotionally, and physically, while the other person moves forward without even looking back. Because here's the harsh truth that no one wants to face. If someone doesn't value you, it's not because they can't. It's because they don't want to. How emotional attachment destroys your mind, body, and spirit. Mentally, attachment turns you into your own worst enemy. Your mind becomes a constant battlefield between hope and reality. You keep telling yourself lies like, maybe if I do this, they'll appreciate me. Maybe they just need more time to realize how they feel about me. If I distance myself, they'll miss me and come back. But the reality is that each day you remain trapped in that illusion. You lose a little more of yourself. Physically, the stress from attachment shows up in your body. Your body knows when you're stuck in a situation that's destroying you. Insomnia, anxiety, fatigue, headaches, none of it is a coincidence. You're pouring immense energy into someone who doesn't return it, and the physical toll is brutal. Spiritually, attachment blocks your growth. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation, the journey of becoming your truest self. But when you cling to someone who doesn't value you, you stray far from your purpose. You become a mere shadow of what you could be, trapped in a one-sided relationship that only drains you. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who spent her days focused on a man who never made her a priority. She was always the one reaching out, calling, trying to make the connection work, while he was never truly present. One night, after yet another ignored message, another excuse that made no sense, she looked at herself in the mirror and asked the only question that mattered. Why am I still here? And in that moment, she saw the truth. It wasn't him who was hurting her. It was her hurting herself by staying. It wasn't him who was betraying her. It was her betraying herself by settling for less. It wasn't him who was destroying her. It was her own lack of courage to let go. That night, she made a decision. She deleted his number. She stopped waiting for his attention. She stopped making efforts for someone who wouldn't make any for her. And when she did, something incredible happened. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. She realized it had never been love. It had been attachment disguised as hope. Here's the lesson you need to remember. If you're still clinging to someone who doesn't value you, it's not love, it's fear. This is what you need to understand. If you have to convince someone to value you, you've already lost. If you feel you must prove your love through sacrifices, it's not love, it's dependence. If that person truly cared, you wouldn't even have to question it. Here's the absolute truth. Love doesn't need to be convinced. It is felt naturally, or it's not love. Love isn't begged for. It flows freely, or it isn't real. Love does not destroy you. What destroys you is your fear of letting go. In the next part, I'll tell you why, when you finally let go, you feel a deep emptiness, and how you can turn that pain into your greatest liberation. The emptiness after letting go. Why it feels like a loss, and how to turn it into freedom. When you finally decide to let go of someone who doesn't value you, you expect to feel immediate relief. You expect to wake up the next day feeling strong, empowered, free. You believe that making the best decision for yourself should instantly erase the pain. But the reality is different. Instead of relief, you feel an overwhelming emptiness. Instead of strength, you are overcome by a sadness that feels endless. Instead of freedom, you feel utterly lost. And it is at that moment that many people break and go back. They convince themselves that letting go wasn't the right choice. They tell themselves it wasn't that bad, that maybe they should have held on a little longer, that the pain they feel now is worse than the pain they felt being undervalued. But here's the truth, that emptiness does not mean you made a mistake. That emptiness is the sign that you finally broke free from an emotional dependency that was destroying you. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid confronting their own soul." And that's exactly what you're feeling right now. You're finally facing yourself without the distraction of someone who never truly valued you. For the first time, there's no one else to blame, no one else to chase after, no one else to pour your energy into. It's just you. And even though it might not seem like it at first, this is the greatest gift you could ever receive. Emptiness is not a loss. It's space for something new. When you let go of someone, your mind enters a state of crisis. Mentally, your brain is wired to resist change, even when the relationship was toxic. Your mind doesn't differentiate between what's good or bad for you. It just craves what's familiar. Emotionally, you feel like you lost a part of yourself, not because that person was essential, but because you invested so much energy into them that letting go left a blank space within you. Energetically, all your focus was directed outward, towards someone else. Now, you must learn to redirect that energy back into yourself. This is where many people stumble. They don't know what to do with all that energy. They don't know how to fill the emptiness in a healthy way. They struggle to support themselves emotionally without the idea of that person in their lives. And that's why they often return. Not because that person was good for them, but because they believe that anything is better than facing the void. But here lies the secret. The void isn't something you have to fill with another person. It's the space you need to rebuild yourself. It's the opportunity to fill yourself with your own essence, to discover who you are beyond that relationship, to reconnect with the version of yourself you abandoned in order to hold on to someone who never truly appreciated you. Let me tell you something. There was a man who spent years chasing a woman who never fully chose him. Every time he tried to walk away, she pulled him back with false promises, but never gave him real commitment. Every time he set boundaries, she manipulated him with sweet words. Years passed like this, until one day, after yet another disappointment, he decided to truly let go. He deleted her contact, walked away without explanation, and for the first time, focused all his energy on himself. The first days were agonizing. The urge to reach out to her consumed him. He felt as if something inside him was dying. But over time, something shifted. He realized that what he really missed wasn't her. He missed the version of himself that existed within that relationship. He missed the illusion, the role of the one trying to make everything work. He missed the validation from someone who had never truly made space for him in her life. And when he understood this, the emptiness disappeared. He realized it had never been love. It had been dependency disguised as connection. That night, he slept peacefully for the first time in years, not because she came back, but because he was no longer waiting for her. How do you turn emptiness into your greatest liberation? First, don't try to fill it with another person. The biggest mistake you can make is jumping into another relationship just to avoid feeling the void. If you do, you'll only repeat the same pattern. The void isn't meant to be filled by someone else. It's meant for you to meet yourself. Second, use that space to heal and rebuild. Ask yourself questions you've never dared to ask. What do I truly want from life outside of a relationship? What parts of myself did I abandon in that connection? What passions and dreams did I set aside while focusing on someone who didn't value me? This is the time to reclaim your identity. Third, learn to hold yourself emotionally without seeking distractions. The void hurts because we are not used to being with ourselves. True strength comes when you can sit in the discomfort of emptiness without running away. That's where transformation happens. Fourth, remember, letting go is not losing, it's gaining freedom. If someone didn't value you, you didn't lose a person. You lost the burden of carrying something that wasn't meant for you. Letting go doesn't leave you with less. It leaves you with more of yourself. Here's the lesson you must remember. If you're feeling the void after letting go, don't panic. The emptiness isn't a punishment. It's your soul clearing space for a new version of yourself. Don't fill it with another relationship or distractions or the desperate hope that person might return. Fill it with the only thing that should have never been missing: yourself. Because here's the absolute truth. If you can hold yourself through that emptiness without giving up, if you can resist the temptation to go back, if you can endure the temporary pain of detachment, very soon you'll realize that what you actually lost wasn't love. It was a burden you were never meant to carry. And next, I'll tell you what happens when you finally let go of the wrong person, and how that simple act creates space for what you truly deserve. Internal healing begins when you let go of the wrong person, when you finally release someone who never valued you. A deep transformation starts to take place inside you. At first, you might not even notice it, but something within you begins to reconfigure. What once was a connection based on dependency or fear of loneliness now becomes a chance to heal and rebuild yourself from the roots. The absence of that person leaves an empty space, and it's within that emptiness where the true transformation happens. Carl Jung called it the process of individuation, the journey of reclaiming all the parts of yourself you lost within that relationship. Carl Jung spoke about the process of individuation, which is the integration of all parts of our being to become complete and authentic individuals. When you are trapped in a relationship with someone who doesn't value you, little by little, you start to fragment. You suppress your needs to avoid causing discomfort. You change your way of being to try to be accepted. And you settle for less than you deserve because you're afraid of losing the person. Without realizing it, you distance yourself from your true essence and become a limited version of yourself, shaped by the dynamic of the relationship. But when you decide to let go, you begin to recover the parts of yourself that you had abandoned, the creativity you set aside, the enthusiasm you lost, the inner strength you thought had faded. Everything starts coming back. And this is where many people feel confused. They ask themselves, how is it possible that after all this pain, I feel more like myself than ever before? The answer is simple. Because by letting go of the wrong person, you reconnect with yourself. Letting go allows you to find your true identity and purpose. One reason why many people cling to unsatisfying relationships is that they find a sense of identity in them. They identify as the one who is always there, the one who never gives up, the one who loves unconditionally, no matter what they receive in return. And when that relationship ends, they feel lost. They no longer know who they are outside of that dynamic. But here's the key. Letting go doesn't leave you without identity. It gives your true identity back to you. If all your energy was focused on someone else, now you can focus it on yourself. If before you lived according to what the other wanted, now you can ask yourself, what do you really want? If before you defined yourself through that relationship, now you have the opportunity to define yourself on your own. This is the hardest part, and at the same time, the most liberating. Because when you allow yourself to rebuild without someone else's shadow, you begin to discover that your life has a much greater purpose than you imagined. The transformation of your energy from dependency to empowerment. When you were in that relationship, all your energy was focused on the other person. You worried about whether they would reply to your messages, whether they paid enough attention to you, whether they valued you enough. Without realizing it, a large part of your emotional, mental, and even physical energy was spent on sustaining something that wasn't really yours. And now that the person is no longer there, you have the opportunity to reclaim all that energy and direct it towards something much more powerful, yourself. Energetically, you stop vibrating in lack and start vibrating in abundance. Mentally, you realize you don't need to beg for love, because real love never makes you doubt your worth. Emotionally, you learn to hold yourself up without needing external validation. And here's where something magical happens. When you heal internally, what used to attract you no longer does. That person you tried so hard to convince to choose you suddenly no longer interests you because you realize you were always enough. You just didn't see it before. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman who spent years in a relationship with a man who never truly valued her. She was always the one trying to find solutions, trying to save the relationship, forgiving over and over again. Until one day, after another disappointment, she decided to let go. The first few days were hard. She felt the urge to call him, to reach out, to do something to win him back. But she resisted. Instead of focusing on him, she focused on herself. She started exercising again after years of neglecting her body. She returned to her passion for painting, which she had set aside for the relationship. She allowed herself to feel her pain without numbing it with distractions. And over time, something changed. She realized she didn't actually miss him. She missed the idea of him. What she really missed was the version of herself that existed in that relationship. A version that depended on someone else to feel complete. And when she understood this, her energy shifted. She no longer felt the need to beg for love. She no longer saw her past as a loss, but as a lesson. And most surprisingly, without even looking, new people started to come into her life. People who truly valued her. People who reflected the new version of herself. A woman who had learned to choose herself. How can you apply this to your life? 1. Focus your energy on your growth. Instead of wasting your energy on someone who doesn't value you, invest it in yourself. Learn something new. Work on your goals. strengthen your mind and spirit. 2. Don't rush to fill the void with another person. Healing happens when you allow yourself to be with yourself without distractions. 3. Discover who you are outside of that relationship. Ask yourself, what things did I stop doing because I was focusing on someone else? Recover those parts of yourself. Trust that letting go will lead you to something better. You may not see it today, but by letting go of what wasn't meant for you, you're creating space for what you truly deserve. The great lesson you must remember: letting go of the wrong person is not the end. It's the beginning of your transformation. Because when you stop clinging to what isn't yours, you open yourself to receiving what you truly need. And in the next part, I'll tell you how your energy changes when you decide to let go, and why, when you stop chasing, your value increases in the eyes of others. The change in how others perceive you when you no longer chase. One of the most surprising changes when you finally let go of someone who didn't value you is how the way others perceive you changes. The moment you stop insisting, stop chasing, and withdraw your energy, something in the dynamic of the relationship shifts completely. You spent so much time clinging to that person, trying to prove your love, trying to get them to choose you, that without realizing it, you gave all the power to them. You taught them that you would always be there, that no matter how far they pulled away or how much they ignored you, somehow you would always come back. But when you decide to let go, when you truly walk away with no intention of returning, something changes in the energy you project. And that's something people notice even if you don't say a single word. Why is absence more powerful than insistence? Human beings tend to underestimate what is always available. We take it for granted. We see it as something safe, something that won't change. But the moment it disappears, the instant it's no longer there, the brain goes into a state of alert. It's a simple psychological phenomenon. What once seemed secure suddenly becomes an unknown. The mind starts to wonder, why are they not chasing me anymore? Did they find someone better? Did they really walk away for good? What was once a constant presence becomes a void, and the mind hates voids. It tries to fill them with answers, with justifications, with assumptions. That person who took you for granted starts seeing you differently, not because their feelings changed, but because they can no longer predict you. They can't be sure you'll be there when they need you. The simple act of withdrawing, without drama, without explanations, without trying to make them miss you, has a stronger impact than any speech you could give. Because absence creates curiosity, and curiosity is the first step toward revaluation. How the energy you project changes the way others see you. When you shift from an energy of dependency to one of self-sufficiency, people notice. You no longer carry that desperation to be chosen. You no longer seek external validation. You no longer need someone else's gaze to feel that you exist. And that makes you magnetic. Carl Jung spoke about individuation, the process by which an individual becomes the most authentic and complete version of themselves. Part of this journey involves letting go of external identifications, emotional dependencies, and the dynamics where we hand over our power to others. When you achieve this, when you truly detach from the need for approval, the world perceives you differently. Your energy shifts because you no longer emit lack, but abundance, and abundance is magnetic. People are drawn to those who do not need anything from them. There is a strength in someone who knows how to be alone, who feels whole by themselves, and that strength is perceived without a single word being spoken. The psychological effect on someone who loses you when you detach is profound. When someone has held power over you for a long time, when they believed they could leave and you would still be there waiting, they have never truly faced the possibility of losing you. But when you leave, when you genuinely disconnect, that person enters a phase of uncertainty. At first, they might not notice the difference. They may even feel relief, assuming everything remains under their control. Yet over time, as they realize you truly haven't returned, something triggers within their mind. They begin to question if they made the right decision. They wonder if you were really as dispensable as they thought, and the doubt starts to grow. It is often at this point that the person who never valued you tries to come back. Not because they have changed, not because they now love you differently, but because your absence creates discomfort. The human mind is wired to desire what it no longer possesses. This is where many people make the mistake of interpreting their return as a sign of love, when in reality it is merely the ego reacting to the loss of control. If you give in, if you open the door again, the cycle restarts. They receive the validation they need, and once more, their interest fades. Understanding the importance of not going back is crucial to avoid repeating the same pattern over and over again. Because when you choose to let go, you are not just doing it for the other person, you are doing it for yourself. It's not about manipulating anyone with your absence, but about reclaiming your power, about stepping away from a place where you are not valued. If someone only begins to see you when you leave, do they really deserve your presence? If someone needs to lose you to realize your worth, do they truly understand your value? The answer is simple: no. That is why, when you take the step to let go, when you genuinely decide to prioritize yourself, you must do it without expecting a reaction. Because if you do it hoping they will miss you and come back, you are still trapped in the same dynamic. Letting go is an act of self-love, not strategy. It is understanding that your value does not depend on whether someone else recognizes it. It is knowing that when you respect yourself enough to walk away from where you are not appreciated, you open yourself up to the kind of relationships you truly deserve. Because when you stop chasing, your value becomes unquestionable. Not because others say so, but because you have finally recognized it yourself. And when that happens, when you stop seeking validation from the world has no choice but to see you differently. That is the true transformation. And next, we will see how this liberation allows you to attract relationships that truly align with you. When you stop clinging to what isn't meant for you, life rewards you with what you truly deserve. How do you attract relationships that genuinely align with you once you have released what was not yours? When you stop insisting on relationships where you are not valued, an inevitable question arises: what comes next? For many, the emptiness that follows letting go can trigger fear. They wonder if they will ever find someone who truly values them. Is it possible to attract a relationship where love, respect, and reciprocity are the foundation? The answer is yes. But the path to get there is not the one most imagined. It's not about desperately searching, nor about rushing the process. It's also not about proving to the world that you've moved on. The true secret to attracting relationships that genuinely correspond to you is becoming the person you wish to meet. The energy you emit is the energy you attract. Everything in life operates on the basis of energy. Our emotions, thoughts, and beliefs create a vibration that the world perceives, even unconsciously. If you are still holding on to the pain of the past, If you still believe that people will hurt you, you are likely to keep attracting relationships that reinforce that belief. Not because the world is against you, but because you unconsciously seek to confirm what you already believe. But when you start working on yourself, when you become someone who loves and respects themselves and who does not accept less than they deserve, the kind of people who enter your life changes. You stop settling. You stop accepting crumbs of love. You stop allowing relationships where you have to beg for attention or validation. The healing process before attracting the right relationship is essential. Before a healthy relationship can enter your life, you must heal what once led you to accept less than you deserved. Often, the relationships we have reflect internal wounds we haven't addressed. Maybe you accepted less because you didn't believe you deserved more. Maybe you stayed in painful relationships because you were taught that love requires sacrifice. But real love is not built on suffering. You do not have to prove your worth to anyone. You do not have to convince someone to love you. You do not have to wait for someone to choose you. Healthy love flows naturally. It is built on mutual respect, admiration, and the genuine desire to be with each other, without games, without strategies, without the fear of losing. To reach that kind of love, you must first build it within yourself. You have to leave behind the scarcity mindset regarding love. One of the biggest obstacles to attracting relationships that truly align with us, it is the scarcity mindset. Many believe that if they let someone go, they will never find anyone better. They fear that if they release what no longer serves them, they will be condemned to eternal loneliness. They see love as a rare and difficult treasure to find, imagining there are few real options, and therefore think it's better to cling to anything, even if it's far from ideal. But Carl Jung taught that this mentality only keeps you trapped in relationships that do not nourish your soul. Love is not a limited resource. There isn't just one person in the world meant for you. When you shift your consciousness to recognize the abundance of love and trust that there are people capable of loving you as you truly deserve, you stop settling for less than what makes you happy. And when you stop settling, the universe, reflecting your inner reality, responds. The role of patience and trust in the process is fundamental. Attracting a relationship that genuinely resonates with your being is not an immediate event. It doesn't happen the moment you release what was never truly yours. It is a journey requiring patience, unwavering trust, and above all, a deep commitment to yourself. Along this journey, moments of doubt will inevitably arise. There will be days when you will wonder if you made the right decision by leaving behind what failed to value you. You might experience loneliness at times, questioning whether someone truly exists for you. But every time doubt creeps in, remember this: it is far better to be alone for a while and build something real than to remain in relationships that drain your spirit simply because you fear solitude. Temporary loneliness is far preferable to the wrong company. When you truly grasp this truth, when you embrace the idea that you do not need someone else to feel complete, that is when the right person finally appears. How to recognize a relationship that truly corresponds to you. When someone arrives who genuinely values you, you feel it immediately. There is no confusion, no anxiety, no endless guessing about the other person's feelings. Some signs that you are in a healthy reciprocal relationship include clear and open communication, without games or manipulations. The relationship brings peace, not anxiety. You don't feel the need to change yourself to be loved. You are accepted exactly as you are. There is balance in the effort. Both sides invest equally in the relationship. You feel safe, appreciated, and respected at all times. Relationships that truly belong to you do not generate constant distress or doubts. You do not have to wonder if the other person wants to be with you because they show you through consistent actions, not just words. The final key is this: you must become the person you wish to attract. If you desire a relationship grounded in respect, love, and stability, you must first cultivate these qualities within yourself. If you seek a partner who values you deeply, begin by valuing yourself. If you desire emotional maturity in a partner, you must first work on your own emotional maturity. If you long for sincere, reciprocal love, you must stop settling for anything less. The love you accept is a reflection of the love you believe you deserve. When you become the best version of yourself, when you prioritize your own growth, your happiness, and your inner peace, you begin to attract people who resonate at that same frequency. Not because you are actively searching for them, but because by changing who you are, you inevitably change what you attract. And when that transformation occurs, the love that enters your life is no longer something you must chase or force. It is the kind of love that flows naturally, the kind that adds to your life, the kind that truly belongs to you. The love you attract is always a mirror of the love you give yourself. If you continue to settle for relationships where you are not truly valued, it is time to pause and look inward. It is not about finding the right person, but about becoming someone who loves themselves enough to no longer accept less than they deserve. The emptiness you feel after releasing what is not meant for you is only temporary, but the growth that follows is permanent. Stop seeking external validation and start building a strong, unwavering relationship with yourself. When you truly value yourself, the type of love you attract transforms. And the most beautiful part is that when you let go of what does not contribute to your growth, you create space for something far greater than you ever imagined. If this message resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so that we can continue growing together. The wound of not feeling enough. It's the invisible root behind the way you love. There's a reason why you keep giving your heart to someone who can't give you anything in return. And that reason has nothing to do with them. It's not about who they are or what they do. It's about you. About something deeper. Something that can't be seen with the naked eye. A wound you haven't dared to face yet. Because when love starts to feel like a battle to be chosen, when you exhaust yourself trying to prove your worth to someone who doesn't see it, when you justify every act of indifference with the desperate hope that maybe one day they'll change, what's speaking in those moments isn't your heart, it's your wound. And that wound has a name, the wound of not feeling enough. This is one of the most invisible emotional wounds, and at the same time, one of the most destructive, because it doesn't scream, it doesn't show, it's not easily recognized, but it shapes everything, every decision you make, every connection you form, and the way you give and receive love. Most women who love from this space don't do it because they lack emotional intelligence. They do it because deep down, way beneath the surface, they are still trying to prove they are worthy of love. That's the root of it all. Because if you believe you have to earn love, you're already starting from a place of lack. Carl Jung said, "What you do not make conscious will manifest as fate." That's exactly what happens when your wound is the one making the choices for you. That wound keeps choosing the same pattern, again and again. Someone emotionally unavailable, closed off, damaged. Someone who can't truly offer you anything real. But they awaken in you the illusion that if they love you, if you can be the one to make them change, then finally you'll have proven that you're enough. But that's the trap. You're trying to heal your self-worth through someone else, and that someone, by definition, is unavailable for love. And that's not a coincidence. It's a mirror of what you're still not giving yourself. This pattern didn't begin with them. It began with your story, with that stage in your life when you first felt that your worth depended on how hard you tried, when you learned you had to be more obedient, more perfect, more quiet, more pleasing, just to be loved. That programming rooted itself deep in your unconscious. And now, without even realizing it, you're repeating the same story, hoping that this time it will be different, that this time the other person will choose you, that this time love will heal what hurt before. But it doesn't work that way. As long as your wound is in the driver's seat, all you will feel is frustration, emptiness, and the constant belief that you're not enough. You give everything. You wait. You hope. And when you don't receive the same in return, you blame yourself. Maybe I was too much. Maybe I expected too much. Maybe I shouldn't have said how I felt. And in doing so, without even noticing, you become your own aggressor. What you don't realize is that this dynamic isn't love. It's a defense mechanism. It's the way your psyche is trying to fix something that was left unresolved years ago. But here's the hard truth. No one is going to come and give you the love you keep denying yourself. No one can fill the space where you have abandoned yourself. And yes, that truth hurts, but it's also the key to your freedom. Because the day you finally understand this, you stop begging for love. You stop justifying someone's absence. You stop chasing after someone who doesn't see you. You begin to realize you don't need to convince anyone that you're worthy. And if someone can't see your worth, that's not your place. Carl Jung spoke of individuation as the process of internal integration. That begins the moment you have the courage to look at your wound without filters. When you finally see that your desperation to be loved comes from a part of you that was ignored long before this relationship. And that part of you, that little inner girl, needs you now. She needs your presence, your validation, your love. No one else can give that to her. No one else can love her for you. That is your responsibility. And if you don't take it, you'll keep falling into the same relationships again and again, with different names, different faces, different stories, but always the same pattern. Loving someone who can't give you anything back. So before you keep blaming the other person, ask yourself, from where am I loving? If you're loving from fear, from abandonment, from emptiness, then it's time to stop, to pause, to look at yourself, to listen, to heal. Because you can't keep giving all of yourself to someone who doesn't even know how to receive it. That's not noble. That's emotional sacrifice. And sacrifice does not build love. It only depletes you. This, right here, is the beginning, the root, the core of why you keep choosing people who can't give you anything. But there's something even deeper you need to understand. Why does this lack attract you? Why does that emotional coldness pull you in? Why, even knowing they're not good for you, can't you let them go? Let's explore that next. Because within that question lies the hidden logic of your wound, the reason why you keep repeating what hurts you the most. Why do you keep loving from a place of lack? Why do you feel drawn to people who offer you nothing? There is a quiet kind of pain, subtle, persistent, that becomes a pattern when it's left unhealed. It's a pain that leads you to look in the wrong direction. A pain that convinces you love lives in the place where it hurts the most. A pain that tells you that if someone doesn't choose you, you must be the problem. And that's how the cycle begins. A story that repeats without your awareness. A story where you are constantly drawn to emotionally unavailable people. Cold, distant, detached. People who can't give you anything, yet somehow leave a mark on your soul. And it's not random. It's not bad luck. It's not that you just have terrible taste in partners. It's your wound, speaking, choosing, repeating what feels familiar. Because when you grow up in an environment where love was scarce, where you had to earn affection, a kind word, a gentle look, something inside you begins to associate love with sacrifice, with pain, with fear, with waiting. And without realizing it, that becomes your emotional compass. Your unconscious starts seeking out that same energy in your relationships. If all of this is starting to open your eyes, imagine what's coming next. The final sign is the most revealing of all. Your heart keeps attracting what resembles your past, not to punish you, but to heal what remains unresolved, to close the circle. Carl Jung explained it with striking precision. The unconscious is always striving to complete itself, and one of the ways it tries to do so is through symbolic repetition. Without even realizing it, you search for someone who can make you feel the same way you felt with that figure who once hurt you. But this time, you do it with the unconscious hope that things will be different. And that's exactly where the greatest self-deception begins. You start to believe that you can earn the love of someone who doesn't even have love to give. You find yourself drawn to someone emotionally unavailable, someone ambivalent, someone who gets close one day and then vanishes the next. And instead of walking away, something deep inside you latches on even harder. A voice, old and hidden and painfully familiar, whispers, "If this time I can get them to choose me, then I'm worthy. If I can win the love of someone who resembles the one who once hurt me, then I'll finally feel whole." But that love never comes, and you stay. You wait. You endure. You justify. You convince yourself that you're fighting for something meaningful, when in truth, you're just reliving an old wound. A wound born from lack, from absence, from a time when you had to settle for crumbs and call it love. And because your wound grew in the soil of scarcity, you now feel strangely comfortable in spaces where nothing is given, where there's no reciprocity, where you give everything and all you receive are fragments, moments so small and insignificant, but your mind turns them into castles. A glance, a message, a faint memory, and your imagination fills in the rest. Your heart clings to a promise that was never made, to a possibility that never existed. And the cruelest part is when someone finally comes along, who sees you, who treats you well, who doesn't require you to earn their love, who doesn't make you feel small. You recoil. You feel bored. You feel it's too good to be true. You feel like it's not real. So, you push them away. Why? Because your wound doesn't recognize healthy love. Because for you, loving has always meant struggle, sacrifice, anxiety. And when there's no drama, your system panics. It becomes disoriented. That isn't love. That's emotional trauma, disguised as love. Your body has learned to live on high alert, to anticipate disappointment, to fear abandonment. So paradoxically, you feel more alive in relationships that hurt, because pain has become your comfort zone. That's where the pattern becomes addictive, because every time someone rejects you, it activates that ancient wound, that little girl inside you who was never enough to be embraced, who was never truly seen, who had to work so hard to earn even the tiniest drop of affection. And she's still there, still waiting, still hoping that someone someday will finally say, "I choose you, I love you, I see you." But you keep searching for that recognition in all the wrong places, in people who don't have the capacity to give you what you deserve. And so, the cycle repeats. Love becomes a war you always lose, because the price of that war is your self-worth, your energy, your peace. And there comes a point when you no longer know whether you're fighting for love or just reliving the abandonment. That's when consciousness must enter the scene, because as long as your wound remains hidden in the shadows, it will continue choosing your relationships. It will continue disguising emotional dependence as love, and you'll keep believing that you are the problem, when in reality, the only thing you need is to heal that part of yourself that learned to suffer in order to feel loved. You don't need someone to change. You need to wake up, to see the pattern, to recognize with clarity that love born from lack will never bring you fulfillment, only more emptiness. And the truth is, you deserve something completely different. But in order to receive it, you first have to stop chasing what cannot give you anything. Here's the trap of emotional self-deception: justifying the unjustifiable out of fear of abandonment. There's something that almost no one tells you when it comes to toxic or one-sided relationships. Most people don't stay because they can't leave. They stay because they've built a story to justify the unjustifiable. This is what's called emotional self-deception, and it's one of the most subtle defense mechanisms of the unconscious. It protects you from having to face the pain head-on. When you're with someone who doesn't meet your needs, who makes you feel invisible, confused, used, or not enough, some part of you knows. You feel it. You sense it. But there's another part, the most wounded, the most vulnerable, that starts to tell another story. They're like this because they've suffered too much. I understand them. That's why it doesn't bother me so much. They're just afraid of love. Deep down, I know they love me. They just don't know how to show it. And just like that, without even realizing it, you begin to hold the relationship together more with your imagination than with reality. You start constructing a narrative that transforms abuse into sensitivity, coldness into trauma, indifference into fear of love, instability into emotional depth. And all of that feels noble. It feels loving. It feels like empathy. But it's not. It's fear. There's a fear that many of us carry deep inside, a fear that we barely dare to admit even to ourselves. It's the fear of accepting that someone you love isn't choosing you, that despite all the effort, the care, the sacrifices, and the pieces of yourself you've handed over, none of it is enough to make them stay. That person will not change, not for you, not for everything you've given. And maybe, deep down, you already know it. But the fear is not just about them leaving. What truly paralyzes you is the idea of being left alone, with your wounds wide open and your illusions shattered. Because it wasn't just about the person. It was about the story you built around them. That story made you feel like you weren't alone, like everything made sense, like love would eventually fix it all. Losing the illusion, that narrative you clung to so tightly, is what hurts the most. So you fight to keep that illusion alive. You make excuses. You tell yourself they're going through something tough, that they're emotionally distant now, but they'll come around, that their silence doesn't mean indifference, it just means they're tired. You remember the moments when they were sweet and attentive, and you convince yourself that those moments define who they really are. But what you're actually doing is something far more dangerous. You're turning your pain into justification. You're using your empathy as armor to protect yourself from the truth. Because if you looked clearly, if you admitted to yourself that they're using you, that they don't love you the way you love them, that there's no real reciprocity, you'd have to do the unthinkable. You'd have to walk away. You'd have to let go. You'd have to set boundaries. And that, for you, touches the deepest wound, the one that whispers, "You're not enough." The one that says, "If I leave, no one will ever truly love me." The one that makes you believe that maybe you're the problem, that maybe you're asking for too much. So you choose the path that feels safest to your nervous system. Denial, self-deception. And the thing about self-deception is that it works for a while. It gives you temporary relief. It numbs the ache. Until one day, your body begins to speak louder than your thoughts. The anxiety becomes constant. You can't sleep peacefully. You start to look in the mirror and not recognize the person staring back at you. And then it hits you. Your entire world is orbiting around someone who doesn't even notice your gravity. That realization shatters your soul, not just because of what the relationship has become, but because you realize you betrayed yourself. You silenced your instincts. You made yourself small to be loved. You mistook endurance for love. You became an expert at forgiving someone who never even apologized, all because you were terrified of being alone. But that fear, that terror of abandonment, isn't new. It didn't begin with this relationship. That fear was planted long ago, in the earliest chapters of your life. In those moments when you needed love, but it wasn't given. When you felt unseen, and you blamed yourself. When you learned to be the understanding one, the good one, the one who doesn't complain, the one who waits, who adjusts, who doesn't ask for too much. And now, you're repeating the same story. That unhealed wound is still there, whispering to you that if you're just more patient, more empathetic, more loving, maybe then they'll change. Maybe then they'll see your worth. But here's the truth. They won't. Not because you're unworthy of love, but because when you love from your wounds, you choose from your need, not from your self-worth. The people you attract aren't there to heal you. They're there to reflect what still needs healing within you. And that's why the pattern repeats. Even when the faces change, the pain feels the same. The same emptiness when they don't reply. The same hope when they show a flicker of affection. And you hold on for months, sometimes years, even decades, clinging to the fantasy you created, hoping it might finally become real. But it never does, because it was never love. It was a reflection of your fear. The most courageous thing you can do is not to wait. The real bravery lies in facing the pain, in admitting that you lied to yourself, that you justified what was unjustifiable, because you didn't know how to live without the illusion. But that's where transformation begins, when you stop lying to yourself, when you choose to see reality, even if it hurts, when you take the side of your dignity, not your desperation. It's not easy, but it's necessary, because no real change can happen without a dose of brutal honesty. And sometimes, the hardest truth is the one that sets you free. Many people silently ask themselves the same question after a painful breakup, or after falling back into a relationship that drained them. How could this happen again? And what hurts the most is not just the pain itself. It's realizing that despite all the promises you made to yourself, you repeated the same pattern. Again. That's not a coincidence. It's an unconscious mechanism, a pattern rooted so deeply inside you that it cannot be undone by willpower alone. Carl Jung said it best. What you do not make conscious will manifest as fate. That's exactly what happens with unhealed emotional wounds. They don't stay quiet. They don't fade away with time. They manifest. They disguise themselves. They show up in your relationships, in the way you love, in the way you attach, in the way you sacrifice, until you face them, acknowledge them, embrace them, and begin to transform them. When a wound is born in childhood, abandonment, rejection, betrayal, humiliation, lack of love, it leaves a permanent imprint on your emotional blueprint. It becomes an internal map, and from that moment on, you begin to repeat the pattern, not because you want to suffer, but because your soul is trying to close a story that was left unfinished. And where does it search for closure? In your relationships. Because intimate relationships are the perfect stage where your unconscious can reenact the unresolved pain. It's in the places where you care the most, where you feel most vulnerable, where you give the most, that your deepest traumas are triggered. That's why sometimes you fall in love with a dizzying intensity. You feel like you've found your soulmate, your missing piece, someone from another lifetime. But in reality, what's happening is not destiny, it's recognition, unconscious recognition. Your wound recognizes their energy, not from light, but from pain. Your body says, "This feels like the abandonment I once knew." And instead of fleeing, you stay. Because part of you believes this time you can fix it, that this time you can rewrite the ending. But you can't, because that person isn't there to heal you. They're there to reflect what you still need to heal within yourself. And until you understand this, you will keep repeating the same trauma over and over, changing faces, but never changing the wound. Trauma has a quiet way of pulling you back into what's familiar, even if what's familiar is destroying you. It makes you believe that something new is dangerous, that something healthy is boring, that something peaceful isn't real, because your body only knows how to survive in chaos. And when peace finally comes, you don't know what to do with it. Your nervous system panics. Your heart feels empty. That's the hidden effect of unhealed emotional trauma. It silently ties you to the pain you're familiar with and distances you from the very experiences that could actually heal you. And as long as you're not aware of it, your wound will continue to recreate the same kind of situations that once hurt you the most. The worst part is, it'll do it with your full consent. You'll be the one justifying it, defending it, holding on to it, not because you want more pain, but because you've confused that pain with love. If you grew up believing that love had to be earned, that you had to fight for it, wait for it, prove yourself worthy of it, then when someone offers you genuine, unconditional love, you can't accept it. It doesn't fit your inner map. It terrifies you. So, once again, you find yourself drawn to the one who's unavailable, to the one who doesn't choose you, to the one who makes you feel like you're not enough. Not because you're foolish, but because your trauma is still in control. And that trauma, it doesn't calm down just because someone else loves you more. It doesn't get smaller with affection alone. It only starts to heal through awareness, when you find the courage to look back with a different set of eyes, when you finally realize that the little girl who was abandoned, who thought she had to be perfect to be loved, is still waiting, still hoping someone will come and say, "I see you. You are enough. You don't have to keep fighting." But no one can truly give her that. No one, except you. As long as you're searching outside for a healing that can only come from within, you'll keep falling into the same emotional trap. Because relationships don't heal wounds. They reveal them. They expose what you haven't yet integrated. And yes, that hurts. But it's also a gift. Because every time the same pain repeats, you're being offered a choice to sink deeper into the wound or to walk through that pain toward real healing. Repetition isn't your punishment. It's your mirror. And when you finally learn to look at that reflection without judgment, without shame, with complete honesty, the cycle begins to break. Not suddenly, not overnight, but it does begin to break. It starts when you stop chasing what keeps hurting you, when you choose to stop defending the indefensible, when you set boundaries, not out of pride, but from deep self-love, when you decide to walk away, not because you've stopped feeling, but because you refuse to keep bleeding for someone who doesn't know how to hold your heart. That's the beginning of true awakening, because a woman who has faced her wounds with compassion no longer stays where love isn't mutual. She no longer accepts emotional crumbs. She no longer convinces herself that almost love is enough. A woman who has stood in the mirror of her relationships and made the decision to heal. She no longer repeats her trauma. She transforms it. She alchemizes it into wisdom. And from that place, she begins to love in a new way, not from scarcity, but from awareness, from wholeness, healing the wound, choosing differently. That is the awakening that changes everything. There comes a moment in every woman's life, a woman who's loved from her wounds, when something inside her shatters. But this time, it doesn't break the way it used to. This time, it's not a fall into darkness. It's a crack that lets in the light. It's a rupture that doesn't destroy her, but opens her eyes, opens her soul, opens her truth. And in that moment, even through the pain, even through the tears, even in fear, there is a part of her that can never fall back asleep. That moment arrives when you can no longer carry the emotional lie that kept you trapped. When you just can't keep making excuses for what is clearly not love. When you become profoundly tired of chasing what never truly chose you. And even if your heart still feels something, you choose to walk away. Even if it aches, you choose to let go. Even if your whole body trembles, you choose yourself. That is the real act of awakening. And no one can do it for you. Healing a wound is not some magical event. It's not a straight path. It's not waking up one day with everything perfectly fixed. Healing is deeper than that, messier than that. It's real. It's raw. It's sitting with yourself and saying, yes, I was that little girl who didn't feel good enough. Yes, I learned to love from sacrifice, from waiting, from fear. Yes, I betrayed myself again and again, just to avoid losing others. But it's also looking at yourself with deep compassion, and then adding the one thing that changes everything. No more. Because there comes a point where pain is no longer a valid excuse, and instead becomes the fuel. The fuel not to justify what you've allowed, but to start building the life and love you truly deserve. That is healing. It's no longer repeating from the wound. It's beginning to choose from consciousness. Carl Jung spoke of the process of individuation as the sacred journey through which the soul meets itself. It is a path of inner awakening where you begin to stop living for others, no longer shaped by expectations, masks, or roles you've learned to play. It's the moment you choose to no longer abandon yourself for the sake of fitting in or being accepted. Individuation is the courageous act of integrating your shadow, your wounds, your past, not to bury them or hide them away, but to understand them fully. And through understanding, you stop projecting them onto the world. You stop making choices from a place of emptiness, pain, or fear. Suddenly, you no longer seek validation from others. You no longer feel the urge to prove your worth through someone else's love. Because finally, something clicks deep inside. Something no one ever taught you when you needed it most. You are enough. And this isn't just a nice quote or a comforting phrase. It's a truth that becomes etched into your being when you finally decide to do the inner work. When you face the pain you spent a lifetime avoiding. When you stop running, stop begging, stop chasing, and instead start walking, step by step, back to yourself, back home. This journey isn't smooth or perfect. There will be setbacks, days of doubt, moments when you miss even the things that once hurt you. Because that's how the emotional system works. It circles back to what it knows, even if it's toxic, even if it's painful. But now, you're different. You see the pattern. You've reached the bottom, and while it felt like the end, it was really the beginning. The dark doorway that led you to your true worth. When a woman finally looks at herself with radical honesty, something shifts. She no longer bargains with her dignity. She no longer pours energy into places where there's no reciprocity. She stops begging for love from people who only know how to offer indifference. And that changes everything. You begin to feel peace in your own solitude, a peace more profound than the noise of being in bad company. You begin to enjoy your own silence, your own body, your own choices. You start to love not from a place of lack or desperation, but from wholeness. You choose from awareness, not from wounds. And when love arrives, it no longer makes you question yourself. It doesn't make you chase it. It doesn't confuse you or make you feel small. Real love does not drain you. It doesn't make you feel like you have to fight every day just to be seen. Real love sees you, even in your silence. It protects you, even without you asking. It chooses you, not through empty promises, but through meaningful actions. And most importantly, real love never tries to fill your inner void. Instead, it simply walks beside you while you fill it from within. That's what happens when you start choosing differently. Not because fear disappeared, not because you stopped loving, but because you finally chose yourself first. Because you realized, perhaps for the first time, that the most important love isn't the one you receive, but the one you stop denying yourself. And that truth changes everything. Healing your wound means you stop chasing love. You start becoming it. You made it this far in life because deep down, you already knew it. Some part of you didn't want to keep reliving the same pain with different faces. And now, it's clear. Your story doesn't end where you were broken. It truly begins the moment you choose to stop perpetuating the same pain with each decision you make. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. Healing means facing it with open eyes and an open heart, and choosing not to abandon yourself anymore just to keep someone else. A woman who chooses healing doesn't become cold or closed off or untrusting. She becomes aware, and that awareness makes her free. Free to stop begging for love. Free to stop carrying what was never hers to hold. Free to finally say, I did not come into this life to beg for what I deserve to receive in fullness. Carl Jung believed that the soul has an instinct toward wholeness, and that wholeness can never be reached by waiting for others to complete you. It comes when you choose to complete yourself from within. Today, you are ready. ready to let go of the patterns, to release the trauma, to shed the version of you that believed she had to be chosen in order to matter. Today marks a new beginning, one that doesn't come from fear, but from truth. If you feel this in your heart, write it in the comments. I no longer chase love. I am love. And from that place, I choose differently. Because this is the woman I'm becoming. This is the woman I'm finally allowing myself to be. If you've made it this far, it's because you're ready to transform your life. But this is only the beginning. Watch the next video. It will leave you speechless and take you even deeper into this journey of transformation. Click now, subscribe, and turn on the notifications so you never miss the content that could change the way you see everything. I'll see you in the next one. How many times did you believe you were simply tired, when in reality you were standing at the edge of a collapse of the soul? Have you ever looked into the mirror and not recognized the face staring back at you? And what if I told you that perhaps, just perhaps, the worst has already passed and you didn't even notice it? True happiness is not exuberant, loud, or spectacular like pleasure or satisfaction. It is quiet, serene, and deeply internal. Carl Jung once said that some pains do not leave visible scars. Instead, they reorganize the soul from within. These are not the kinds of wounds we share aloud. They are the ones we hide even from ourselves. The pains we endured while smiling at the world, even as we slowly died on the inside. And here is the most terrifying thought. Maybe you already overcame all of that, without rituals, without applause, without anyone even realizing it. Because certain trials are so intimate, so hidden, that only silence itself is capable of bearing witness to them. Every one of us, at some point in life, faces a pain so profound that it dismantles everything: our values, our identity, our dreams, our faith. What remains is a strange and haunting emptiness. But what if that emptiness is not the end? What if it is, in truth, the womb of rebirth? Carl Jung described this as the process of individuation, a kind of psychological birth. Not everyone undergoes it. Most people survive pain only to continue hiding from themselves. But a few, a rare few, are reborn, not as someone better, but as someone more authentic, more whole. Today, we are going to walk together through 7 silent signs that you have endured the most painful trial of your soul and survived, not in the way the world expects, but in a quieter, deeper way. You survived without spectacle, without performance. You survived by becoming who you always were before the trauma, before the fall. We will not celebrate this with fireworks or loud declarations. We will recognize it simply, with a glance, with a shared silence, with that strange feeling of "I know exactly what you mean." Prepare yourself. You may see yourself here, perhaps for the very first time. There exists a form of solitude that drags you downward into the depths. It is not the romanticized absence of company. It is the dense and suffocating emptiness of feeling alien even to yourself. It is the experience of waking in the morning and asking yourself, with a sincerity that cuts deep, whether anyone would truly notice your absence. For a long time, you confused being alone with being broken, as if the silence around you exposed some secret defect within. You filled that silence with voices, faces, noise, distractions, anything to avoid hearing what was rising from within. And in a way, that made sense, because deep inside, in the most suffocated corner of your being, there echoed a despair you didn't know how to name. Jung referred to this as the hidden trial of the soul, that stage in which the very foundations of identity are dismantled so that something more authentic may emerge. But until that transformation occurs, solitude feels like punishment. Do you remember Jung's words? Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. Think back to those nights when you scrolled endlessly through your feed, not out of genuine interest, but out of desperation. Think of that Saturday night when you did everything possible to go out, only to avoid admitting that the real fear was being left alone with yourself. Or that strange moment when, even surrounded by people, you felt invisible, or worse, non-existent. That is when the pain tightens its grip, because it is not the world that rejects you. It is you who abandoned yourself, trying to fit into affections that never truly saw you. You spent your life trying to be necessary to others so you would not have to face the question, if no one needs me, then who am I? And then one day, something changes. Not dramatically, almost imperceptibly. You realize that silence no longer threatens you. It begins to embrace you. And this transition is one of the greatest signs of psychological maturity a human being can undergo. Solitude turns into sanctuary. You start to discover that there is beauty in stillness, that the most powerful insights do not come from conversations, but from the spaces between them. You stop running and you begin listening. And what you hear is not the madness you always feared, but an ancient wisdom buried under layers of fear, masks, and stories others once told about you. Solitude is the place where truth dwells. In this new inner territory, you rediscover your own company, and surprisingly, it is good company. In the space once occupied by neediness and demands, something subtle begins to arise. Real presence. You notice how much energy you used to waste filling emptiness with people, with tasks, with urgencies that never truly belong to you. Now time slows down. The mind grows still. You sit with yourself, and you no longer feel ashamed of what lives within. At this point, your worth no longer depends on being seen. You stop performing to be validated. You stop running to be accepted. Solitude returns you to yourself, and with it comes an unexpected sense of freedom. The freedom to be who you are, even without witnesses. And people notice. They sense something different in you. It is not arrogance, it is depth. You no longer speak to convince. You speak because you have something real to say. And sometimes you choose silence because you have learned that silence also communicates, often with greater precision. That kind of presence cannot be faked. It comes from the journey through the desert, from those nights when you almost surrendered, but chose to hold on a little longer, just to see what might happen. And it did happen. What emerged was you, more whole, less dependent, more serene, less hungry. Of course, longing still visits you, but now you recognize it. It no longer dominates you. You greet it like an old acquaintance, but you no longer hand it the keys to your house. You stopped distracting yourself with crowds that never truly heard you. You finally began listening to the most important voice of your life, your own. And if someone asks you what changed, you may not know how to explain it, because it was not a rational decision. It was a silent mutation. Jung described it as the differentiation between the ego and the self. The moment when you stop being merely an image trying to please others and begin to embody a presence capable of sustaining your own existence. Solitude did not destroy you. It revealed you. And then comes another trial. Have you ever felt that the harder you try to hold yourself together, the faster you seem to break inside? That is not weakness. It is mental overload. We live surrounded by emotional noise, and no one ever taught us how to filter what truly matters. The real problem lies not in your emotions, but in the lack of mental structure to contain them. Most people act directly from emotion, without realizing they can cultivate a steadier, colder, more disciplined way of navigating life. And yes, it can be trained. There comes a moment in life when you stop running, not because you feel safe, but because you are tired. Tired of hiding from yourself, tired of pretending not to feel, not to think, not to desire what you truly want, tired of sustaining a domesticated version of yourself that the world demanded. And then, for the very first time, you stand face to face with what you always avoided, your shadow. To become conscious of your own shadow is a moral task. It is to recognize that evil is not only out there, but also within us. Jung described the shadow as everything we are, but refused to admit we are. It is the anger you swallow while smiling, the desire you judge as impure, the envy you deny, the cruelty contained in thoughts you would never dare to speak aloud. For years you tried to keep that side hidden. The shadow is uncomfortable. It unmasks you. It shows you that you are not simply a good person. You are complex, ambiguous, contradictory. And that realization hurts because it dismantles the idealized image you worked so hard to construct. But then, the day arrives. The day when hiding becomes more painful than facing it. The day when truth, no matter how uncomfortable, becomes less corrosive than the lie you tell yourself. And so, with fear, with trembling, with shame, you look, not with hatred, but with honesty. You see the manipulation you used to feel safe. You see the ways you tried to control others with guilt or victimhood. You see how you hurt the ones you loved most because you didn't know how to face your fear of abandonment. You see that behind your kindness, there was often a desperate hunger to be loved. And that vision tears you apart, but it also sets you free. Because for the first time, you stop performing. You drop the role of the good soul, the evolved person, the enlightened being. You begin to become real. Jung said, "You do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is where true transformation begins. The shadow ceases to be an enemy. It becomes raw material. You realize you don't need to destroy your anger. You need to listen to it. You don't need to erase your ego. You need to integrate it. Your aggression, when accepted, transforms into courage. Your vanity, when illuminated, becomes healthy self-esteem. Your envy, when understood, reveals the dreams you buried. You don't become better, you become whole. And the most beautiful part, from this point forward, you begin to recognize the shadow in others, not with judgment, but with compassion. You see when someone manipulates because they feel powerless. You see when a criticism arises from a wound. You see when someone lashes out in violence because they never learned how to love. And you understand. Everyone is trying to cope with their own darkness. Some deny it. Others project it. But very few have the courage to integrate it. You have begun to develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the capacity to hold opposites within yourself without being destroyed by them. You stopped chasing absolute coherence, and you started living your contradictions as part of your very nature. Being human means living in paradox. We are at once light and shadow, reason and madness, love and fear. And becoming conscious of this changes everything. You stop demanding purity from yourself and from others. You stop idealizing relationships, people, and ideas. You step into life with both feet on the ground, stripped of romantic illusions about perfection. And that is exactly what makes your presence rare. You carry an energy of truth, a vibration that doesn't pretend, doesn't force, and doesn't apologize for existing. People sense it. They feel that you are not there to please, but neither are you there to harm. You are simply there, in your wholeness, with your shadows, your light, and your boundaries. And that is power. Not the power to control, but the power of never betraying yourself. You stopped running from who you are, and now you walk with a confidence that does not come from certainty, but from intimacy with your own abysses. Whoever has seen themselves completely no longer fears the judgment of others. Whoever has tasted the bitter flavor of their own truth learns to recognize the taste of freedom. You spent your entire life looking at yourself through mirrors that were not yours. Every gesture, every choice, every word filtered through the unspoken question, "What will they think of me?" Yet no one warned you how much that would cost. No one told you that living under another's gaze means existing as a reflection, never as a presence. And the worst part is, even when you do everything right, you are still judged. Public opinion is not the conscience of the people. It is merely the judgment of the loudest voices. You shaped your personality like a chameleon trained to please. At home, you were one version, with friends another, at work, still another. And at night, when your head touched the pillow, only emptiness remained. Who am I when no one is watching? The truth is brutal. You spent so long editing yourself that you began to believe the edited version was the real one. And that made you sick. Because each time you adapted just to be accepted, you left a piece of yourself behind. Every time you swallowed what you wanted to say, smiled without meaning it, accepted without wanting to, you betrayed yourself. And the soul, though silent, records every tiny betrayal. To be normal is the goal of the defeated. Total adaptation to the world does not make us healthier. It makes us trivial. But there came a breaking point. You could no longer endure that diffuse discomfort, that causeless exhaustion, that nameless anguish. That was when you realized the truth. They were seeing you, but not looking at you. They were accepting you, but not loving you. Because love that must be won by performance is never real. It is conditional, unstable, fragile, and for that reason, you lived tense, always trying to keep the mask in place, always afraid it would slip. But the body tires, the soul demands truth, and one day you let go of the mirror. Not as an act of rebellion, but as an act of liberation. You began to ask, what do I think of myself? What do I desire without the filter of another's expectation? What do I feel when I am not trying to please anyone? And little by little, you began to recover from a dependency no one recognizes as addiction. The addiction to approval. The opinions of others do not disappear, but they lose their weight. You hear them, but you don't internalize them. You consider them, but you don't bend to them. Because now, something stronger exists within you. Inner authority. And that change is visceral. You stop measuring your worth through likes, reactions, or glances. You begin choosing what you wear, what you say, who you walk with. Not to impress, but to reflect who you truly are. And the most striking part is that criticism still comes, but now it no longer paralyzes you. You observe it with the calm of someone who understands that not everyone will understand, and that is perfectly fine. Freedom begins when you stop caring about what others expect and start honoring what your soul truly needs. The world is not accustomed to those who can stand alone. Those who need no audience unsettle others. Those who do not justify themselves destabilize. Those who do not seek approval make others uncomfortable, and you will feel it. Some will distance themselves, others will call you arrogant, still others will try to push you back into the old script. They will say, "You have changed." But what they really mean is, "You stopped submitting." And that frightens me. Then you will understand that being yourself has a price, but it is a fair price compared to the cost of being what others expect. Because when you free yourself from the need to please, something extraordinary happens. You begin to recognize yourself in the mirror. For the first time, you look into your own eyes and feel presence. You feel truth, you feel dignity, not because you are perfect, but because you no longer betray yourself. Your communication changes. You speak less, but with more depth. You choose silence more carefully, and when you speak, no one doubts your words because they carry the energy of someone who is not trying to convince, only to express. And that is rare, and that is powerful. You do not close yourself off from the world, but neither do you bend to it. You no longer need to prove anything, because now who you are is no longer dependent on reflection. It is inside, fixed, alive, unshakable. Here ends the era of performance and begins the era of presence. Some deaths do not involve graves, do not require funerals, yet still bury the person you once were. Do you remember when that happened to you? It was not a single event, but a succession of inner collapses. First, your plans began to crumble, then your certainties. Later, your closest relationships slipped through your fingers, as if the universe had placed you in emotional quarantine. And then the final blow. You no longer recognized yourself. There is no awakening of consciousness without pain. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul. And it was at that point when you thought, "It's over." But it was not over. That was the beginning. What you felt as an ending was the collapse of the false self. The structure you had built over years, made of expectations, adaptations, and wounds, was imploding. And like every building with weak foundations, ruin was inevitable. The psyche cannot endure forever in contradiction with the soul. That is psychological death, the collapse of the narrative, the internal cancellation of all you thought you were, a silence between what has ended and what has not yet been born. And yes, that space between the death of the old self and the birth of the new is terrifying. There is no ground, no compass, only the echo of doubt. What if I never find myself again? But the soul, unlike the mind, does not fear the void. It knows that chaos is fertile. The destruction that visited you did not come to punish you, but to free you. To be reborn, you must first allow the death of what you were. The old must die so that the new can breathe. And of course, you resisted. You tried to preserve old versions of yourself, to cling to relationships that were already dead, to force paths that no longer belonged to you. But the more you insisted, the more the universe whispered, "Let go." Letting go was not easy, because there was attachment, there was fear, because even emotional prisons hold a strange kind of comfort. They are familiar. But then, at some moment, in the middle of a sleepless night, a conversation, a breakdown of tears in the bathroom, something in you gave way, and you surrendered, not to defeat, but to mystery. You accepted dissolution. You allowed yourself not to know who you were. You stopped searching for an immediate meaning. And in that surrender, in that silent yielding, the subtle miracle began to take place. Rebirth. But not a rebirth filled with bright lights or heavenly choirs. It was organic, profound, almost imperceptible. You simply began to notice that even without knowing who you were, there was something in you quietly observing everything. An unbroken spark, a thread of consciousness that never snapped, a silence that was not empty but like a womb. When everything seems lost, it is then that we are closest to ourselves. Reconstruction was not quick, and it never will be. You do not return to being someone after disintegration. You reinvent yourself piece by piece, but now with authenticity. What once was a hunger for approval becomes a search for inner coherence. What once was anxiety for control turns into the practice of patience. You begin to walk more slowly, to speak less, to value things that once seemed insignificant. The smell of coffee, the light entering through the window, the rhythm of your breath. Urgencies change, haste loses meaning, depth becomes your compass. And little by little the people around you begin to notice, though they cannot explain it. They sense something different in you, something that cannot be taught, only lived. You now carry a calm that did not come from the absence of pain, but from facing it. A strength that does not shout, but sustains. A maturity that does not flaunt diplomas, but honors what is essential. You stopped merely surviving and began to truly exist. That is real freedom. Not living as others expect, but as you truly are after everything. And when you look back at the ruins, you no longer feel shame, you feel gratitude, because it was there, on the cold ground of your fall, that you finally touched your truth. And you will never be the same again. There is a kind of silence that is not absence, but absolute presence. You have come this far, and perhaps you have not yet realized how much you have changed, but something within you, invisible and indescribable, no longer allows certain things. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped wasting energy in arguments that lead nowhere. You stopped accepting invitations out of guilt, replying to messages out of obligation, smiling when everything in you cried for retreat. Not because you became cold, but because you finally understood the value of what you carry. Your energy has become sacred. Individuation is the journey through which a human being becomes who they truly are, free from external expectations and loyal only to their inner essence. Carl Jung spoke of it as the movement from living under the weight of masks to living in the clarity of one's authentic soul. What once was excess now becomes a filter. You, who once were available to everyone, now choose carefully. You, who once said yes to everything, now understand the weight of a no spoken with firmness and tenderness. And perhaps the most extraordinary part is this: people can feel it. Without uttering a single word, your body communicates. The space around you announces it. Not every kind of energy is allowed in. You no longer need to force yourself or impose anything. You simply emanate. And that emanation is not arrogance, it is clarity. It is as if your very presence has been tuned to a deeper frequency, one that does not seek to please, nor to fight, but simply to be. To those still enslaved by the need for external approval, that quiet strength feels unsettling. For your serenity cannot be manipulated. Your silence is no longer emptiness. It has become fortitude. And your distance, so often misunderstood, is nothing more than energetic self-protection. To learn to respect one's own energy is one of the highest acts of spiritual maturity. In the manuscripts inspired by Jungian thought, this wisdom echoes, Not everyone deserves access to what is most sacred within you: your attention, your time, your listening, your very soul. You stopped insisting on reaching out to people who refuse to reach for themselves. You stopped trying to save those who insist on remaining in chaos. Finally, you learned the difference between empathy and self-abandonment. And perhaps the hardest step of all, you forgave yourself. You forgave yourself for the times you gave too much, bent too much, and carried too much of a burden that was never yours to bear. The forces that once ruled you, guilt, scarcity, fear of rejection, are now nothing but history. Not because you erased them, but because you transcended them. Your presence now carries weight, a gravity that no longer bends to superficial spaces. You cannot fit into shallow places anymore, and your soul refuses to shrink itself to fit. For that reason, some people will drift away, but those who remain fully. Now you draw toward you people, experiences, and paths that vibrate in resonance with your inner reunion. And you quietly release anything that belongs to the old versions of yourself, those exhausted versions who gave endlessly and were never seen. Your energy is no longer currency. It has become a temple, and you alone choose when to open the doors, and most of all, with whom. This sovereignty cannot be achieved by techniques or forced practices. It does not come from books, courses, or esoteric rituals. It is the natural side effect of having died and been reborn within yourself. Now you carry a center, a grounding axis, an inner place that no one can ever invade. And the most beautiful paradox is this: it makes you less violent, not more. You no longer shout to be heard. You no longer argue to be respected. You no longer stretch yourself just to be loved. Instead, you preserve yourself. And in a world that profits from your exhaustion, that preservation is the most revolutionary act of all. True power does not lie in dominating others, but in refusing to let them dominate you. As Viktor Frankl once said, the essence of freedom is not in control over circumstances, but in the refusal to surrender your inner sovereignty. You have become someone who no longer seeks to stand out, and yet you do, because your energy is no longer scarcity, it is consistency. You have nothing left to prove. Not that you are well, not that you have figured everything out. You simply know. You have arrived. You have arrived at yourself. You have arrived at a place where your soul can finally rest, where peace is not the absence of pain, but the presence of inner coherence. Life will, of course, continue to test you. But now, you no longer respond with despair. You respond with silence, with discernment, with maturity. Because in the end, the clearest sign that you have overcome the deepest trial of your soul is not in what you have conquered, but in what you no longer give away, your energy to those who cannot honor it. If these words are reaching you, it is not by accident. Only those who have felt their soul crack open from within, who have had to gather themselves in silence just to keep breathing, can recognize the subtle signs of their own transformation. You did not merely survive pain, you walked through it. And that changes everything. Because survival is resistance, but walking through is transformation. It is opening yourself to the storm, like opening a window in the middle of chaos, not to shield yourself, but to let the air finally move through. And that is what you did. Perhaps without witnesses, perhaps without applause, but with a courage that does not scream. It whispers. You change the way you face silence, the way you face shadow, judgment, falling, limits, energy, and above all, your truth. You did not rebuild yourself to please or to fit in. You rebuilt yourself to stand, and finally, to sustain yourself. That is rare. That is sacred. That is psychologically revolutionary. Individuation is not the pursuit of perfection. It is the radical acceptance of the self. Jung described it not as becoming flawless, but as becoming whole. And perhaps you are still on the way. Perhaps you still stumble over old patterns. Perhaps you still wonder whether you are healed. But listen carefully. Healing is not a destination. It is a way of walking. It is how you carry your pain without denying it, without romanticizing it, without letting it rule you. You are no longer the same, and that alone is what matters. Now you see beyond the surface. Now you have the calm to hold the unknown. Now you discern when to protect your energy. Now you possess the maturity not to be swallowed by the chaos of others. And now you hold silence. Yes, a silence that does not kill, but shelters. That silence is the proof that the soul has passed through fire and emerged whole, even if marked. And now you know. What once felt like the end was only the blossoming of what had always been there, asleep, waiting to ripen. Your truest presence. You may sometimes feel nostalgia for who you once were, but believe me, you lost nothing that was truly yours. You only shed the excess, the defenses, the noise. And in that release, you created space. Space to exist. Space to feel. Space to live with psychic dignity. You no longer need anyone's permission to exist. Your soul has already legitimized you. So breathe. You made it here. Not unscathed, but lucid. Not perfect, but whole. And that is the real victory of a soul that has passed through its darkest trial. It did not become stronger. It became truer. And from this point forward, everything shifts because you have shifted. And where you now place your feet, new paths begin to form. Years ago, I too went through one of those seasons when life turns you inside out and forgets to sew you back together. Everything seemed meaningless. Words, bonds, even faith itself. And the most painful part was that no one noticed. Outwardly, I kept smiling, producing, answering messages. But inside, I was in ruins. Until one day, in the middle of my collapse, I came across a line from Jung. I don't remember if it was in a book, in a note, or if life itself whispered it. But it said something like this: "What you need to heal is not outside. It is in what you refuse to face within yourself." That pierced through me. In that moment, I realized that what I was calling suffering was nothing more than the summons to finally meet myself. And today, after many falls, silences, and rebirths, I decided to create this space, this channel, this late-night conversation where you can take off the mask, lower your shoulders, and whisper, "I have been there too." If this message spoke to some forgotten part of you, if you thought at any moment, "This is exactly what I needed to hear," then leave your trace here. Share your thoughts, your wounds, your reflections. Let this space not just be my voice, but also yours. Because in a world that demands we pretend sanity, here you are allowed to be human. And perhaps together, we will keep finding each other in the dark, in the depth, and in what is most true within us.